Hello everyone, welcome to the third edition or third session in the B-K-O Citadel Webinar Series. Today we'll be talking about dealing with sexual harassment in the workplace, and I'm very happy that you're here. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're doing well today. If you hear some background noise, please never mind, it's the rain. I don't know where you are, but it's raining here in Lagos. For those of you joining us from London, the US, you're all welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Really happy to have you. So in a bit, I will introduce our facilitators for today. But just before I do that, please take a look at the poll that is running and make sure that you participate in giving us your opinion. Okay, I can see responses coming in for our first question. Thank you so much. All right, so with me, I have two facilitators, Miss Priya, Clement, and Oluwatosin, Apata. So Priya is a human resources professional with a bachelor's degree in computer science engineering and a master's degree in business management. She's also an associate of the Chartered Institute of Personal Development in the UK. She's an HR specialist with over 15 years of experience in HR recruitment and training. She also has experience in extensive consultative experience on change management, performance management, disciplinary procedures, and other legislative issues. She's worked with private, financial, educational, and health sectors, and she's an active member where she plays a role in the UK government sector as human resource business partner. And Oluwatosin Apata is our second facilitator. She's a seasoned HR professional, also with a bachelor's degree in human resource management and a master's degree in international human resources management. She's an associate of the CIPD, that is the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, of Personnel Development in the UK. She's a human resource partner with the government sector in the UK, and she has major HR experience in the housing sector, social care sector, and like I said, the government sector, which is the most recent of her endeavors. So you're welcome. Thank you very much for joining us, Priya and Tosin. Priya will be... Okay, go ahead.
No, I said thank you for having us, Safi.
Oh, you're
Thanks
welcome.
for having us.
Hi, you're welcome. Looking really lovely, ladies, I must say.
Thank you.
Awesome. So Priya will be taking the first segment of this session. So please go ahead, Priya. You're welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for taking that poll. It makes it really interesting for me to start off by sharing my first slide. Sorry, I think my screen's frozen. In the very first poll, a lot of people have actually said no, so that's quite interesting to see how many people actually think there's sexual harassment in the workplace. It's one of the most difficult situations any person can actually face when they're working. It's not the same when you're talking about performance management or workload or anything like that. This is very personal. It's a very emotional situations for most people in a workplace. No workplace actually is immune to sexual harassment. A lack of reported cases or because one person hasn't seen it doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually not taken place. So it's quite interesting from the poll when you've answered saying, have you witnessed sexual harassment case at work? We've had 18 people say no. So that's an interesting one. But hopefully by the end of this, when Tosin and myself are kind of finishes, you'd be able to recognize some of those subtleties that actually happen in work and how you can actually support yourself, your colleagues, managers, and friends at work in dealing with that. So if I move on to my first slide, which actually talks about first things first, what does sexual harassment mean? The long and short of it is it's very unwelcome. Any kind of sexual advances or requests for sexual favor, whether it's verbal, non-verbal, anything which is implicit or explicit, is not welcome. If you don't like it and if you don't think that's appropriate, that's not welcome. Anything that can actually affect someone's employability, and you'd say how? Because if someone's trying to make advances to a member of staff and they feel the person's in a senior position or in a position where they can influence their employment, that affects them. It can affect your work performance because if you feel, well, if you don't respond and you don't act the way you need to do, will they have repercussions in your workplace? It can cause intimidating behavior. And it can make the work environment quite offensive. The other thing is sexual harassment doesn't have to be just women. Unfortunately, our male colleagues also have to go through it from time to time. So it's not just for women. We have to remember that it's not always just the women. And also we have to remember that it's not always the victim who can actually have a feeling of harassment. If someone's witnessed that, and they can find that quite disturbing. If I take Tosin and myself as an example, we work quite closely, and if I see something happening to Tosin, that would affect me because she's my friend and I want to support her. But if I'm worried about supporting her, that affects me as well. And you think, well, if it's happened to her, it can happen to me as well. So we have to be mindful about that. Now, the harasser can be anybody. It can be a supervisor. It can be another colleague. It doesn't have to be a senior colleague. It could even be a junior member of staff, somebody from another area, a co-worker, someone who's not even an employee. You might have contractors, you might have customers who come in to your businesses who could try and have this kind of behavior with your members of staff. So it's not necessarily, it's not a hierarchical situation. I think most times we think sexual harassment is a hierarchical situation. It's always the supervisor or somebody in a senior position. And again, that's not always true. What are the signs you'd actually do to recognize sexual harassment? These are some of the examples, and I'm sure you've actually seen this, and you'd have seen this in a workplace and you think, oh, they're just having banter, they're having a joke, having obscene gestures, making kissing sounds, very common, calling someone honey, sweetheart, darling. They may not like it. They may not think it's appropriate. A lot of things, again, telling sexual jokes, you might think, oh, it's just a joke. Come on, you need to have a laugh about it. But a lot of people may not feel very comfortable about that. You make indecent comments and you're talking about somebody else. As a group of men or as a group of women, you might be talking about someone, but someone in that group may not like it because they don't like doing that. But because they're in that group, they just stand there and say, oh, it's not me who said it, it is somebody else. And I don't know how many of you have actually seen this in your workplace and how many of you actually think it's appropriate. But these are some of the very, very common subtleties that actually happen in a workplace that affect people. I mean, the most common one, I've experienced it myself, is, you know, someone will purposely brush past you and try and make physical contact with you in a work corridor. And that makes you really uncomfortable. You know, and these are really subtle things. And sometimes it can happen by mistake. Don't get me wrong, you know, you might be in the lift and you're rushing to get out, and it can happen. But what we're saying is, you know, that shouldn't be an excuse though. If that's happened, apologize and make sure that doesn't happen again. But it does happen. And that's one of the things you'd have to be mindful about. You know, quickly moving on from that, there's loads of myths about sexual harassment. And I think this is one of the things we can talk for days on the end. Women enjoy eve teasing. Women like that because they like the attention. Actually, it's not. It's quite humiliating. It's quite intimidating. It's actually frightening in a workplace because you're there to work. You want to keep your job. All of us come to work to do a job. We want to earn a living. We don't come there to be objectified. We don't come there to feel frightened, to be intimidated. In fact, a lot of times, work is an escape for a lot of us. We have our own issues in our personal life. We come to work as a sanctuary. All employees spend about 75% of their lifetime at work. We actually spend more time at work than we do at home. So that is the place we need to feel safe and not feel objectified. A lot of times, men and women actually say eve teasing is a harmless flirtation. Actually, no, it's about how you make somebody feel. If it's unwelcome, it cannot be considered harmless. If I don't like the fact that you call me darling and sweetheart and honey, I don't like that, that's unwelcome. If you don't like it, one of the things is to actually say, look, I don't like that. Can we not say that? This is my name. My name's Priya and I prefer to be called Priya rather than anything else. This is really common. Women who say no actually mean yes.
Priya? I can't hear you clearly. Can you hear us?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, it's better now. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of background noise. A lot of times women are actually afraid to talk about, and they get worried about talking about these issues. And some of the things that we do want to, if this is something that you want to put up, you want to speak up and speak out, you know, it's useful to have these things displayed in your workplace. Don't ignore it. Don't pretend that it hasn't happened. If you think the behavior is unwelcome, a lot of times, if you actually tell somebody and say, look, I don't like that, they might stop. If they don't stop, then please report it. You've got to be able to tell somebody in your HR or somebody in your management exactly what happened. Don't tolerate that behavior, and don't tolerate it if you see them doing it to somebody else. If you see a friend of yours, you know, if you're out together and you see something your friend, your colleague has done to someone else, is making that person uncomfortable, you can see it. You can see it in their body language. You can see it in their eyes. Talk to your friend and say, look, maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe that's not appropriate. That person doesn't look comfortable. That person doesn't look confident about it. You need to have a supportive work environment. You need to have that environment where people can actually come and talk to you about their problems, listen to them with empathy. One of the worst things you can actually do in this situation is laugh it off and say, oh, that person's, they're always joking, and it's fine. Listen to them. And if you think that person's always joking, then maybe you need to go and tell them, saying, look, a lot of people can take your jokes, not everyone. And just be mindful about those situations. I can see loads of you raising your hands up, but what I'm going to do is going to let Tosin continue with this, and then we'll come back to your questions if you've got your hands raised up.
Okay, thank you, Priya. Thank you very much. Priya has just concluded the first part of our session. So Tosin will be taking the remaining aspect on this topic. And after this, we will have Q&A. So everyone, please hold on for a bit with your questions. You can also type them in the Q&A section. However, just hold on. We will take your Q&A shortly. So Tosin, you're welcome. Please continue with your part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Safi. So just to do a bit of recap, we are aware that sexual harassment is a global issue and it's not peculiar to any race or any geographical location. Its manifestation might be more subtle in some countries and more blatant in others. But the baseline is sexual harassment is sexual harassment. Can I extend to add that the victim may be male or female, so no particular gender, and also, may I also add, that no particular sexual orientation. So my focus was going to be on the corporate responsibility for curbing and addressing this menace called sexual harassment. So the best practices I'm going to be talking about are practices that have been applied in different organizations across different geographical location, and they've been tried, they've been tested, and they're trusted. So let's proceed. So the first thing that we are proposing is to create and communicate a very clear anti-harassment policy. It will be interesting to see what percentage of delegates have policies and procedures specifically for sexual harassment in the organization. So dealing with sexual harassment on the policy, it has to be in accordance to the law of the land. I understand that different organizations, different countries have got different legislation guarding and guiding such things like sexual harassment and all. So the first things first is that whenever you draw up your policy should be in accordance with the law of your land. It was quite interesting when I was doing the research to see how some laws in some countries are actually sort of void of any substance to guard against sexual harassment in the workplace. It was very interesting to read Section 262, subsection 1 of the Criminal Law of Lagos State, which has a provision that anybody who sexually harasses another is guilty of felony and is liable for, and can be liable to up to 3 years of imprisonment. So you need to be aware and understand the law of your land and how to apply it in your policy. So once you have your policy drawn up, it's not enough to just have it in black and white. You should also sort of publish it, make it known within the organization. People should know where to look for this policy. We sort of say, stick it in your employee handbook. But it's also safe to say there's from the number of employee handbooks I've seen, it's interesting to see where issues of sexual harassment is actually placed in the handbook. Most of the ones I've seen are almost at the end of the page, and I'm sure, like every other person, how many people actually read the handbook to the last page. So I think the positioning of where it is on your employee handbook also says a lot about you as an organization. Conducting sexual harassment and retraining for everybody. So after your policy has been drawn up and circulated, it is always beneficial to the organization to train people. There are bespoke training. You could have a bespoke training for this. You could buy an off-the-shelf training package for this. You know your organization. You know the organization culture. You would understand the best way of reaching out to members of your organization. A copy and paste approach is never the way forward for such training. Decide what is best for your organization. And it's so important to say that you can also include this as part of your induction process so that any new intake into your organization would know from the onset that this organization is big on sexual harassment, on trying to avoid sexual harassment. Next slide, please. So we also say ensure managers and supervisors understand the obligation to maintain zero tolerance for harassment in the workplace. It's one thing to say zero tolerance. It's another thing to show zero tolerance. So less speaking, more doing. If it's on your policy, it's on your procedures, please follow it through. You need a workforce that would trust that should they ever find themselves in that situation where they're sexually harassed, they know that the organization is going to sit up and take it seriously. Employees should also know their options if they find themselves in such situations. So one of the things we sort of promote is you have a very basic flow chart where people can see visual representation of what to do, what the next steps are, who to speak to within the organization. Priya and I were having a very interesting conversation, and we were saying, because of the sensitivity of sexual harassment and how some organizations sort of, also some cultural and religious impacts sort of affects this, organizations need to be very careful on how they make information available. So say, for instance, you stick up something on sexual harassment on like a notice board in front of your office or in your major place in the workplace. If I stand there and I'm reading, Priya might walk past and think, oh, Tosin is reading sexual harassment, is something going on with her, woo, woo, woo. Before you know it, what might get round, and that's the beginning of a lot more issues. So we were sort of talking about, your computer mouse pad. You could have something that, very straight to the point as a form of advertising and publishing that. People know what to do, people know who to speak to. As an organization, you might decide to have a dedicated phone line where people can call in and sort of report cases and talk to someone about it. Employees have the right to feel safe in their work environment. Also to define clear consequences of such behavior. Actions and consequences, consequences and actions. Your policy needs to be very clear. If you're caught doing this, what are the consequences? We also appreciate that there is no copy and paste approach to that. Organizations might take the view of it's dealt with on a case-by-case basis. Some would say it's not a big deal. It's whatever happened is not as bad or as grievous as another incident. So we always promote that there is a very clear line of reporting, of investigating. The processes are clear. Everyone knows what to do and at what point. Another best practice for employers is to cultivate the culture where sexual harassment is not welcome or tolerated. So some people have the notion that if the sexual harassment itself does not happen in the office building, it is not sexual harassment, and your employer doesn't have to do anything about it. So what we're saying is you need to ensure that any work-sponsored activities, after hours, Christmas parties, birthday dues, and all of that are professional. You know when to draw the line. Managers and everybody, all employees should understand where to draw the line with off-color jokes, sharing and viewing offensive material in the workplace, crude jokes, and the so-called office banter. A lot of people don't even know where to draw the line. We need to remember, first and foremost, we work colleagues. And that mutual respect of being work colleagues should be promoted within the workplace. The way an employer deals with complaints says a lot. So you could have a 100-page policy and document on sexual harassment. Get the best of trainers to come into your workplace and talk about this. But what you actually do tells a lot on how far your staff are going to trust you when they find themselves in that such an environment. So if a complaint comes in, you treat it with care. Sensitive, it's a very sensitive thing. You treat it accordingly. You speak to your relevant people. If you're going to get a panel together, they understand the sensitivity of it. So it's not, Tosin's on the sexual harassment panel, you know, after works, I go for drinks with Priya, and that is the topic of discussion at the pub. So it has to be dealt with the confidentiality that it warrants. If the harassment is discovered, so harassment can be, like Priya said previously, it can be witnessed by other people. So not necessarily the victim has to report it. If I see something wrong, speak up, speak out, say something about it. The culture and the nurture of, you know, sweeping things under the carpet because it is not my business, I have nothing to do about it. There has to be a mental shift from that. We're all in this together. We're in the workplace together. We spend most of our living and breathing hours in the workplace. So it's our duty to ensure that as an employer, I provide a safe working environment, and it's also every other person's individual responsibility to create safe and conducive working environment for their colleagues and everybody within the workplace. If sexual harassment is reported, it is important that there is no risk of victimization. The harassed individual shouldn't be victimized. And that is why you get a lot of people not reporting such things, because it's not just about the reporting, it's about every other thing that comes from it. So take, for instance, if it is a top-down form of harassment, the individual might not want to speak up because, yes, I've reported my line manager, that's it. My appraisals are going to be rubbish. I'm not going to get a salary increment and all. So there's a lot of things that can stem off from reporting sexual harassment. And what a good employer needs to bear in mind is you need to create an environment where an individual will not be victimized because they've reported cases of sexual harassment. So I'm going to spend some more time on talking about the clear process of investigating a complaint of harassment. First things first, your panel or your internal procedures. Like I said earlier, you have your internal procedures clearly outlined. Everybody knows what it is. It is not a secret document. It doesn't have to be kept in the vault. People should have access to it. People should know where to look for it. And it's followed to the T. So you have your policies written, you have your procedures written. A case of sexual harassment has come before you. As an HR practitioner, a line manager, a senior manager, a director, what do you want to think of first? How do I look into this? I need to hear both sides. It's not, I've been sexually harassed, oh yes, that's it, that person is guilty. You need to have an investigation process where it is clearly investigated by an independent panel. It's always amazing where you watch some movies and you see someone going for a sexual harassment hearing. Most of the time it's a female walking into a room and you have 3 men sat at the table. Already in my head, I'm screaming, okay, yeah, it's the boys club, Boy Scout rule, you know, they're gonna stick up for each other. You need to have a balanced approach to those on your panel, you know, having a mix, if it's gonna have a balance of gender, of sex, you know, of race, have a balance on your panel. And it's confidential, like I said earlier, it's confidential, treat it with confidential. There's a way you conduct investigation and you make the individual feel, I shouldn't have done this. You know, you make them, trust them, they've come forward, trust them, but also know that it is a balancing act. Every investigation is a balancing act to fact find. It's a fact finding. It is not a criminal court. It's not a criminal hearing. It's a fact-finding process for the organization. And if the individual, you know, is found guilty, they have a question to answer to, then you follow it down your disciplinary procedure, your disciplinary policy. So it's also interesting to note that most of the time people will want, most people that report sexual harassment might want to be anonymous. And what we say, what we tend to promote is, it is not a taboo to be sexually harassed. It can happen to anybody. You know, don't feel ashamed to come forward. Employers need to create an environment where people are free, believe they are free to come forward to report such things. You want to be an employer of choice, you want to influence your brand. These are one of the things that can be done to promote your brand and ensure that the organization has, you know, zero tolerance to sexual harassment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tosin. Thank you, Priya. That was a very good and precise presentation. This brings us to our Q&A session. So Priya, I hope you're on standby. For our attendees, you can raise your hand if you would like to ask your question directly without typing it. However, we have some questions in the Q&A session already. Okay.
Do you want us to handle the questions in the Q&A first, Safi?
Okay, that is fine, Priya. Let's do the one in the Q&A first. Okay. So Bemi Moses. Okay, can I go ahead?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Bemi Moses asked that we must balance the topic. Most often, sexual harassment is centered on women. It must be equally noted that men face sexual harassment too, in one way or the other. How do we handle women harassing men?
And like we said, very beginning of our presentation, we said it's not towards one gender. Sexual harassment is never towards one gender. It's no matter about when, men, women, or even the sexual orientation of it. You handle every case on its merit, and you do it equally. That it's a male member of staff or a female member of staff. You shouldn't have different approaches, because then what you're trying to do is you're trying to tailor your policies, your procedure to a specific gender, and that becomes an equality issue. You do not want to do that. If you have policy, you have procedure, has to be the same for everyone. Because if I came in and put in a complaint, or if a male colleague came in and put in a complaint or raised an issue, you handle it the exact same thing. The minute you start making differences in your handle it, you're opening up more problems in terms of inequality.
Right. Thank you, Priya. So Akinpelu says, what can HR head, that is the human resource head, do when the CEO or the business owner is the one sexually harassing the female workers? Is it okay if Tosin takes this question?
Fine. So, well, I've had such an experience in the past, and I'm just going to share that with you, and just what you want from it. So, we got an external person, an external top HR person to come into the organization to look at this. So it's always best when you get someone who is an external person who has no direct link or stands to have any benefits of the organization to come in to look at it and deal with it in accordance to the policy. Once you have a policy, the organization's policy is for everybody. You're all equal under that policy. So be it the head of it, the owner, be it the founder, you're all bound. As long as you are an employee of the organization, you're bound by the organization policy.
Right. What if, I mean, you are recommending now that it's best to have an external person, but what if there's an internal HR person? What do they do?
So what do you want to go, Priya?
No, go on. And I'll do it.
So yes, you are an internal HR person. Yeah. However, how do I put this process in this mind? There's a degree of reasonableness and sensibleness we need to apply. You don't want it to sound like, because so many times as HR practitioners, we are in the middle. We're stuck in the middle. We have, you're taking sides because it's the chief exec. You don't want to be in their bad books. it is best so that the whole process is transparent. So it shows that the whole process is transparent and is done by conducted by an independent person. That would be my advice.
Now, can I just carry on from that? I completely agree with you. When it is a very senior member, if you're talking about a head of service, because I think that follows on for another question of yours, Safi. When you have a chief exec, they have the ultimate control. Your HR person is reporting to your chief exec. Yeah, they have that. You have to have a degree of fairness, because one way or the other, it's going to look like, well, they were siding with the chief exec or they weren't. And the employee who's going to come forward actually needs to be confident that if it's about a senior member of staff, there's not going to be a biased approach. And I think that is extremely important. And we, as professionals and in organizations, you need to be able to do that. Like I said, very beginning at the start of this webinar, we said, this is not like any other issue. It's not about performance. It is not about something where you can have facts and you can have information to actually say. A lot of the examples that we've provided about sexual harassment are very subtle. It is very difficult to talk about. It is about the perception and about how you actually also feel and how unwelcome it is for you to be in that situation. It's a very emotional situation. People get emotional about it. The tensions are rising high. You can't think straight most of the times when this happens to you. So you need to be mindful. So if someone's actually bringing that forward, it takes a lot of courage for them to actually bring that forward. And when they bring that forward, if they don't feel that they're going to be heard and it's going to be done in a fair and a transparent manner, you're not going to have that many cases come forward.
Thank you so much, Priya. I think that takes care of that question. Now, another person asks, does it count as sexual harassment if a co-worker or supervisor comments on my clothing or appearance? Wow.
Okay, so this could be a very controversial one. This is a very controversial one. But what I would like to take you back to what Priya said at the beginning of this session is unwarranted, unsolicited. You could turn up to work and someone says, "Oh, you look nice today." I'll take that as a decent thank you. I think it's not so much what is said at times, it is how it is said. "Ooh, you look nice today." That's sexualizing. So if you've taken offense as an individual, yeah, it is for you to then speak up to say, I look nice today, thank you, but the way you said it, feels like a sexualized thing, and please, could you stop it? So it depends on how it's being said. If you as an individual feel, no, I don't like that, I don't like the way it's come out, at times it could just be misinterpretation, but I'm sure most people know when someone else is actually insinuating something. So you call it out there and there. It's about the promptness of calling it out. You don't wait till 10 days later and say, "Remember when you spoke to me the other day? You don't like it, speak up, speak out on the spot."
Okay, as a follow-up to that, sorry, Priya, just a minute. So I feel you're coming from if the person is a colleague. How about if the person is a supervisor? So there you want to exercise some discretion in how you say, "I don't like the way you said it," especially with our Nigerian culture. What do you have to say about that? And Priya, please, you can also answer if you'd like to.
I was gonna shy away from the culture bit of it. I was actually going to shy away from it, because from some people in Western countries, yes, your supervisor is your supervisor, yes, but that doesn't stop me from saying, "I actually don't like that. Could you not, speak to me in that tone, or I find your tone sort of seductive. Could you try not to, and clear things up? You know what, there is nothing between us. I don't, this is not welcome." But then when you then flip the culture thing, it's how you choose as an individual, how confident and comfortable you are as an individual. You could go as far as saying, we know we like to drop the Mr. title thing. So it's like, oh, Mr. XYZ, thanks for complimenting on my appearance today. But I'm sure you could have said that in a more decent way, you know. It's about how you say it, how you react to it. Priya?
You know, most of the time when supervisors, and I definitely don't, when it becomes cultural, it becomes very, very difficult. But I think we've got to step back from that and saying it's a workplace. You will have people from different cultures, from different regions, from a different area who are actually coming and working there. And if you think someone comes and tells me, and again, it's about the way you actually say it. Someone comes and tells me, oh, that dress looks really nice on you. And I'd go, thank you very much. But if I think the person's actually said it in a manner that makes me uncomfortable, like Tosin says, even if it's a supervisor, I'd say, thank you very much. And say, actually, you know what, the way it's a bit embarrassing that you noticed it, just say it. Make it lighthearted if you are worried, because again, we have to be mindful. If it's a supervisory relationship, men or women kind of get a little bit intimidated. Put the onus back on them and say, oh, I'm a bit embarrassed you said that. You know, make it sound that you are the one that has the issue on that, and that's fine, because that sends the message saying I'm not comfortable, that wasn't welcome. So put it in a manner, because a lot of people will actually not want to immediately say, hang on a minute, I didn't like that approach. Because if it's a supervisor, not a lot of us will actually be that open and honest immediately. So actually say, oh, you know, that's a bit embarrassing. I'm a bit embarrassed. I need to make an effort to tone down the next time. That's what they say. And if it happens again, have a one-to-one and say, look, you know, I appreciate that you paid compliments, but it does get a bit embarrassing at times. Please, could we not do that? You can also do it in a polite and respectful manner, so it doesn't come back as a repercussion.
Right. So if I understand you and Tosin correctly, for that dynamic, that kind of relationship, it's better to express how you feel. Or this makes me feel uncomfortable when you say things like this, or I'm embarrassed by this type of compliment, and I would appreciate it if you don't mention it. So I think am I on track?
Yeah.
Right. So our next question, what actionable steps can we take as business leaders to make our employees more comfortable speaking up about sexual harassment?
I think Tosin very beautifully touched it in her part, and we did speak about this. One of the things you do have to be aware when people are looking for information about this, it's about how they're going to be observed at a workplace. One of the small examples we gave was, a mouse pad, because that's constantly at your desk. But the other thing is, have posters and have information put up in your cafeterias, in your ladies and gents restrooms, in the toilets behind the door, because that is an area where you stand and you can stand and look for hours and nobody's going to say, what are you doing? It's your own private space. So nobody's actually going to question that, and that's a safe place to put things up. Have enough information about training. Make sure that everybody's aware about it in their induction. Make this a mandatory training, and make this that you have to renew every year. Every year you have a refresher training. Doesn't matter who you are, right from the CEO to the person at the door. Make sure everybody is aware about that. Have it as a part of your induction. Have it as a part of your renewal refresher training on a year-on-year basis. Make it a topic that HR asks in your annual survey every year. HR should have a well-being. This is how you will make sure that your recruitment campaigns as well, this is a best employer to work for, a safe workplace. Captioning, you need to be able to capitalize on this and actually promote this in the market as well, and saying we as an employer have zero tolerance to something like this. You'll have more people willing to come and work for such an organization. You may have the benefits of pay and whatnot, but the minute you make it a safe working place, you are going to have more people come forward, because it's a big benefit in these days.
Right. Thanks, Priya. Okay, go ahead.
I think an add-on to what Priya's just said is about how it is handled. It has to be consistent. If you've got a policy, you've got a procedure, you be consistent with regardless of whoever is involved in the allegation, and it has to be consistent. So your consistency and how you handle it will give other people in the organization, trust, some degree of trust. Should I come forward, my dignity is going to be maintained. There is a degree of trust put on me. My employer is going to sit up and listen, and I'm going to be given a fair opportunity for this to be looked into.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so just before I take another question, I want to read out what someone has said in the comment section. Abiola says, my comment is that an harassed person shouldn't take a sexist comment that he or she dislikes as enhancing their desirability or attractiveness to the opposite sex. You can right there and then on the spot let the person know you don't welcome such comments or compliments. Not everyone takes such compliments in their stride. So thank you for that contribution, Abiola. You are right on. You're hitting the nail on the head with this comment. So I think you would agree with me, Tosin or Priya?
Yes, like I said earlier, it's about the promptness of your response. If you don't like it, you don't like it. Priya might like something and I don't like it. That doesn't mean that I take offense if Priya condones it. It's about me as an individual. If I don't like it, speak up and speak out.
Great. So our next question now is from Sahid Adebayo, who says, if someone is sexually harassed without enough evidence to back it up, what can someone do? That is, if they don't have enough evidence and the committee set up by the organization to deal with this issue, they're bringing it forward that there's no evidence. So what is the next step for a case like this?
A case like this, even before you go to committee, where toxins come, the policy is someone brings a complaint forward, you've got to have someone investigate it. And as a part of your investigation, and one of the things, not just on sexual harassment, I think you need to have a good investigator in any organization. Managers need to be trained on how to be able to do that. Because where you're talking about sexual harassment, when you don't have evidence, not everyone's going to have an evidence of a text message or a phone call or a video or something someone said. What you'll have to look at is, when did that situation happen? Were there witnesses to that situation? Talk to the witnesses. Get enough information and actually feel. In a lot of cases, it's always useful if they've reported it and some sort of conversation has happened with the harasser. One of the questions is talking about, there was something that we've missed in terms of you comment about someone's clothing. Yeah, and you talk about something that some people take it okay and some people don't. I'll give you my example. I absolutely do not like to swear. And that is very common amongst my friends, and I'm a person who doesn't do that. But if I do take offense to that, I say, I don't like swearing and I don't like that in my conversation, and you make that person aware about it. And they say, oh, it's just banter, Priya. Well, it's banter for them. For me, it's not. And similarly, you're talking about, one of the things that, how would you know if someone's uncomfortable or not? And I would always ask people to kind of take a step back and say, when you're commenting about someone's clothes, someone's appearance and things like that, and think, if someone said that to your friend, a really close friend, or someone said that to you, how would you feel? If men are saying that to women about their clothing, take a step back and saying, if someone said it to a friend of yours, your wife, your sister, or someone, how would you like it? If they said it in the exact same manner, do you think that's comfortable? Would they like it? You've got to take a little bit of sensibility and take a little bit of a step back. You can't always say it's banter. I was just having a joke. It's quite easy to say that, and we get into this constant excuse of saying it's a joke, it's a banter, you've got to take it. That's workplace. That's what happens in a workplace. It's a factory environment. It's a blue collar environment. This is what normally happens. Well, not necessarily, because, in a family, you take your home situation, for example. In a family, we have lots of arguments and disagreements, but there are times when to draw the line, because if you did something out of the ordinary, you'd have mom and dad on your case. So you know when to draw the line. And then similarly in the workplace, and that comes from a place where Tosin's absolutely right. You need to be able to follow your procedure to the T. If people are aware about the consequences and they say, we have a zero tolerance and something happens, this is what will happen. This is the repercussions and this is where it goes. And it's consistent across the board, people will think twice.
All right. So can you speak a bit about the investigation now? Because I believe the person asking is also trying to find out if there isn't enough evidence, right? You know, if you have a good investigator, I guess that helps. But what if this particular member of staff was not opportune to have text message evidence or video? I mean, most of us we don't go with our phones recording conversation. So what can this member of staff do in such, or what would you recommend? Should we start recording our conversations? What do you think?
Yeah, do you mind if I go for this one?
Yeah.
Okay, so where there is a case where a good investigator has looked into the case thoroughly and has concluded that the evidence is not substantial or is not enough. In such cases, what we advise is it's a balance of probability. It is not beyond any reasonable doubt. It's not a criminal court. It is a balance of probability. So what I would usually say is, such an investigation has happened, evidence is lacking. It doesn't mean it never happened. It doesn't mean whoever's come forward is lying about it. And then it doesn't mean that it's true. So in such cases, what would sort of encourage is to have sort of a guidance, like, how do we say this? A guidance procedure where the harassed and the harasser have, get them to retrain, get them to, read the policies again and sign and date it that they've read and understood what the policies are, so that if any other thing happens in the future, you can say as an employer, we've taken the steps from the first allegation. We've ensured that the individual actually does understand the intricate details of the policy and what to do. And what you could also do is, I'm not sure, depending on where people are viewing from, you have some external organizations, some charities that actually focus on such things. It might be helpful to have like a contract to someone that, can offer counseling, can offer support, can offer, advice to people out of the organization. I hope that answers it.
Right. Okay, thank you for that, Tosin. We have very few, we have just about 3 minutes to go for the end of our Q&A session. Do you think you can take any more questions, Tosin?
Yep.
Priya, what do you think? Can we take more questions?
No. There's a couple of questions which talk about women's clothes and stuff.
About the dress code.
Yeah. I think.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
No, you've got a couple of questions which talk about women's dress.
Right.
And I think kind of answer.
Okay.
Yes. So during my presentation, I did say something about commenting on. Sorry, let's read that question out. Let's read the question out so everyone can hear.
Can you please comment where this comes in under sexual harassment? When a lady, especially one that is just starting out her career, is asked to dress in a certain manner. To be specific, if females are told not to wear skirts below the knee. For example, maybe this person is wearing longer skirts than, is preferred in that organization. What would you say on this topic? Although I don't think this is, they're asking the person basically to show more skin. This may not be sexual harassment, I don't know, but what would you comment on this?
So, before you take on any job, I think any applicants would research on the organization they're working for. You research on the organization, you will sort of have a working idea and knowledge of what they do, what their do's are, what their don'ts are. I am not quite sure why showing more flesh would, impact on my ability to do the job and excel at it. I don't know. I think there is a wider context to that. To give you the right answer, we sort of need to understand, to see the bigger picture. So there are a lot of other, I think I have a lot of other questions I would ask before I sort of propose and suggest something that can be applied in that case. But at times I can't understand why more flesh is good. If you're not a lifeguard working in a swimming, and that's for health and safety reasons, where you wear your bathing suits, I don't understand.
For me, that is
okay.
Sorry, Safi. That for me, that is sexual objectification, and that does cross under sexual harassment. If you were not aware, and when you start working, if something like that's told to you, I'd question that. I genuinely question that and say, why is that important? Similarly, if women are wearing too short clothes, or men, on a hot day, which is going to be like that this week, if you're going to walk into work with teeny tiny shorts, you just have to say the people around you may not be very comfortable about it. And sometimes you've got to be mindful. You're coming to work. You might dress like that if you're going to a party, not a problem, but you're coming to a professional work environment. You need to just be slightly aware of how you come across. If you want to come across professional, dress appropriately and dress accordingly,
Sure,
and you have to be and you have to be aware. You will have people. If I walk into work in a sleeveless top, I'm going to know people are going to be observed because my arms are out. Of course, people are going to be saying something. But that doesn't mean you're going to judge the person because of the way they're dressed. You just need to be aware that when you do that, automatically that happens.
But that doesn't warrant
Exactly.
those kinds of behaviors or attention either. The fact that you're dressed that way doesn't mean you're asking for someone to, pay you. Right. Okay.
Each organization usually have their dress code.
Yeah.
So if that's not part of my dress code, I would be raising it.
Why would I do it?
Yeah, I'll be questioning it.
So for that question, it may seem like that particular organization may have that as part of their dress code, not wearing skirts that are longer than the knee. Maybe they are customer facing and they're very particular about your appearance. So is that okay in such a case? Maybe the person didn't know at the point of entry, but it has become an issue while the person has been employed. So what do they do in that situation?
I think I am personally refusing to understand why wearing a skirt above my knee is going to change my customer service, delivery to anybody. It's going to affect what I've got mentally. It is, you dress the way you want to be addressed. For some of us, some people are quite particular about the way they look and the way they come across. Some people just don't care. And that's why I believe each organization would have very, sensible code of dress code policy within the workplace, but I cannot attach wearing a skirt below the knee to what I've got in my brain. I can't understand it.
So for this question,
that might be something the HR department in the organization need to review and get an independent person to review.
Right. I think that's exactly where we need to be going. Thank you, Tosin. Thank you very much. So quickly, the next question. Someone says, one mistake we make is that most people are not aware that sexual harassment is perpetrated by someone of the same sex. Is there any...
I commented on that during my presentation where I said sexual harassment is not restricted to any particular gender or sexual orientation. Things have moved on from the 80s, from the 70s. It could be, I'm really trying not to get into the same-sex relationship, but we acknowledge that and we keep promoting it, that it doesn't have to be one sex versus the other. It could be same sex. The world is revolving. Things are changing. So, and that's why I say, the law of the land has also got to be reviewed in accordance to the social, evolution of the land. Things are changing.
And our final question for our session: how do you deal with a boss who who is constantly asking you to stay back when the rest of the colleagues have gone home after the day's work?
I'd challenge that. I'd actually say I've done my work for the day. And I'd actually, if it's the first time, you look at what's actually been given to you and what you're actually asked to do, and call them out on it and say, I don't think it's fair. Talk about fairness. I don't think I'm the only one who's supposed to be working these extra hours. If you're worried about there's another implication to that, I would ask that question. And we're very much within our right to ask that, because it's a contractual obligation. You know, if you're asked to do X number of hours and you're consistently doing additional hours, and you need to be saying, hang on a minute, why do I need to do that? What's the rationale? And I think that's an easier question to ask, unless it's, you know, there's a direct harassment in that. That's an easier question to ask, saying, is there a particular reason, you know, what's the workload like? Maybe, you know, a couple of my colleagues can also stay back, because if you do that, it looks like I'm doing too many extra hours. If all of us are there, we'll be able to share that workload and actually do that. And that's an easier one to tackle.
Yeah, I think also coming from the angle of the need for work-life balance, you know.
Yeah.
When you're told to stay back, I'm sure anyone at the receiving end can most of the time sort of piece things together if it's not the first time. If it's something happening consistently, you know, you need to start speaking up.
Right, thank you very much. This has been a most robust session. Tosin, Priya, thank you so much for honoring our invitation. You have done excellently well. We hope we can have you here next time to also give us more insights on global issues.
Yeah, no, you're most welcome. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Tosin. So members of our audience, please let us know. Thank you for coming. First of all, thank you for staying with us to the end of our session. But I will also want you to type in the chat what other topics you would like us to treat in our future webinar. So please type in the chat box what other topics you'd like to see. And while we do this, I will be launching the results of the other polls that we have taken, so that we can see the general opinion of most of us on these issues. So okay, Abdul Wahab says something on workplace bullying. Thank you, Abdul Wahab Fashola Williams. What other topics would you like to see, guys? Please let us know. I will be launching the results, sharing the results now. Okay, so we have 75% of people said they have not witnessed a sexual harassment case. That's an interesting one. While 21% of the attendees say they have witnessed, and while 4% said they are not sure if they can recognize it. I hope that with this presentation you have some guideline and you're able to recognize it better now. Everyone, please remember that we'll be sharing the slides, so you can go back to the slides to guide you in formulating your HR policies and processes. We'll also be putting the recording of this webinar on YouTube, and we'll be sharing the link with you as well. So thank you for joining us. Okay, we have another poll. I'm going to share the results of the other poll. So a lot of the managers here are confident. They are very confident that members of staff will report an incident if it happened. That's about 36%. Well, that's not a lot. Okay, 18% are confident, so that is fine. Please, before you go, we have a feedback form that we would like you to fill. Right, so just tell us how satisfied you are with our session. You know, if you're satisfied with how we dealt with this topic, please fill our feedback form. We would really appreciate you filling our feedback. How satisfied you are with the panelists, and if this webinar will encourage you to take action at work, be more proactive in reporting and also identifying cases of sexual harassment in your workplace. Okay. Abiola suggests that we talk about work and social relational ethics. Thank you. That's noted, Abiola. If you haven't taken our feedback form, please go ahead. Thank you very much for taking our poll. Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Tosin, once again. I know that we have taken more time than we planned. I really apologize for the audio issues. I hope you enjoyed coming on here. So I wish everyone a good day. Do enjoy the rest of your Monday. Have a lovely week, and please be proactive at work. Thank you all. Have a great day.